Hey, this is Josh Brothheim. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. I'll give everybody a few more moments to join. Oh, there we go. I see some people are joining right now. So we'll get started here in another 2 or 3 minutes at the latest. Welcome everybody for those that are continuing to join. We'll get started here in another 2 minutes. And if there's any questions, go ahead and post them in the chat. We'll use the chat feature for questions and feedback and comments and all that stuff. So get started here in another about 90 seconds. And welcome the other people that are continuing to join. We'll get started here in now about 30 seconds. So quick countdown, grab a quick beverage and get ready to learn. All right, let me just one setting here. All right, so I think there was a little issue with the chat. I think that's resolved now. If somebody could just try and chat in the chat just to verify that we are good for communicating. There we go. Thank you, Zoe. And there we go. Chat. Perfect. All right, let's do it. So welcome to today's session. We actually have 2 sessions, I think, for you guys today, but let's focus on the first one first. And so that's going to be talking about AWS observability. So what I have for you is about an hour, 45-minute long workshop that we use for customers, and we're going to kind of go through it. We're going to modify, well, actually, we're going to stick pretty close to what we show customers. I'm really not going to modify too much material. So yeah, away we go. Like I said, any questions, go ahead and post them in the chat, and let's learn some stuff. So focusing on AWS observability, but we're going to be using some of the tools within Sumo Logic to enhance AWS observability. I have tracing and root cause explorer listed up here. We're actually going to show a few other features, so a well-rounded experience later today. And so here is kind of a brief agenda. The introduction, which I'm starting to do now. Then I'm going to talk about end-to-end observability, just define it, make sure we're on the same page as far as terminology, things like that. Talk about AWS observability specifically, and then start to show you how Sumo Logic can help with all that. So how we can utilize Root Cause Explorer to, as it says here, find, solve, and prevent failures. How we can utilize tracing. We're going to use spans. We're going to use service maps. What other features? Yeah, those are the main ones. So we're going to get a look at a little bit of everything. And we're going to be hands-on today. So fair warning, the first 10 minutes or so are kind of slide heavy, but then we will jump into the app together and actually poke around Sumo Logic and kind of play around. So that's the plan for today. All right. So going to start with a few slides. This one, hopefully you're very familiar with. I'm not going to, I guess I'll go through it at a higher level. Essentially what we're discussing here is the Sumo Logic benefit, specifically continuous intelligence platform, or referred to as SIP, also referred to as classic Sumo Logic. What we look at in later today is going to be Cloud SIM, which is different. But for today, we're talking about SIP. And with SIP, Sumo Logic can help you with your operational intelligence, your security intelligence, your business intelligence, your global intelligence. Like I said, I hope I don't really have to tell you the ways Sumo Logic can help and why we're good. And of course, with Sumo Logic, we rely on your data or customers' data. So in order for Sumo Logic really to be of any benefit, your data needs to be brought into Sumo Logic, and your data can be out there in a variety of different formats all across the world. You might have data being generated by apps, generated by SaaS services, in the cloud, on bare metal servers, variety of other places. And once you bring your data into Sumo Logic, then our analytics can start to help you. So our systems are multi-tenancy, they're scalable and have elasticity so they can grow with you as you need. Machine learning, APIs, sort of buzzwords, but we have them built in and they work quite well. Advanced analytics, security monitoring, all those things that customers want. On the far right of the screen, showing some of our certifications that we have. Those are pretty important, maybe not to you, maybe not to the users, but somebody in the organization that we're selling to is going to be concerned that we have our PCI and FedRAMP and HIPAA and all that stuff. So we display those kind of proudly. And then at the very bottom, well, who can benefit from Sumo Logic? Well, fortunately for us, everybody can. You don't have to be just in DevOps or just in engineering. A customer success person, a product person can benefit from Sumo Logic. And so yay, Sumo Logic. Now I want to get into observability. And these next few slides, like I said earlier, are really just kind of terminology level setting, if you will. And the first thing I want to start with is monitoring, and specifically monitoring and observability, because I want to make sure we're on that same page, because some people equate the two. Observability equals monitoring, and that's not correct. They're both similar, but there is a difference, and that's what we want to mention now. So monitoring, as it says right here, is the actual collecting and displaying of data in queries and dashboards. Basically, the system or the thing that you've set up to be monitored is letting you know that something is wrong or something is right. We usually refer to monitoring as, we want to monitor for alerts, downtime, things like that. But of course, we can monitor for good things. So we can monitor for a spike in sales or a spike in processing speed, or well, actually probably decrease in processing speed would be more beneficial, but we can do those things. So it doesn't always have to be a negative. But typically monitoring is going to be about telling you the state of the system by looking at the parts that have been configured to be monitored. If a part of the system isn't monitored and hasn't been configured to be monitored, then we really have no idea what's happening there. And knowing something is wrong is important. Observability goes beyond monitoring by bringing together logs, metrics, and traces to give us a broader view and a deeper context. So we can know that something is wrong and also be able to find out why. And so, like I said, just terminology. Now we're going to show a few different, the next three slides are pretty similar. They're just going to be different views of the same kind of content, but it's important to understand. Because as we talk about observability, what I'm using here is an iceberg analogy. At the top, a little bit poking out, but at the bottom is the bulk, and we're going to talk about what that bulk means. So when we're talking about observability, at the very top of that iceberg that's just peeking out, we can set up monitors. Anybody can really set up monitors. They're not very hard to do. And that's going to allow you to, as I described just a moment ago, to look at the what. What is wrong, essentially? What is not peaking, or what is peaking, or things like that. To do so, we need about 20% of our data, and we can utilize logs, metrics, and traces to look at that data. Now, we want to go deeper in this iceberg because we don't just want to figure out the what. The where is probably going to be helpful. Don't we want to know where something is going wrong? That's going to be kind of falling under the diagnostic step. And so now we go from monitoring to diagnosing. And to diagnose, we need more data. We need about 30% more data. And to do so, the logs and traces are going to help us understand the where. Now, there's still one more kind of important piece, and that's the why and the how. And that's where troubleshooting kind of comes in. Now, to do so, you need a lot more data, and specifically logs. And so what we're showing here is the full observability kind of steps, if you will, of monitoring, diagnosing, and troubleshooting. And you'll see those repeated a few times today. Monitoring, diagnosing, troubleshooting. And those equal really the true observability solution, because you're going not just from what, but where, why, and how. And now you can really figure out what has gone wrong or right and continue to do something about it. Now, the other thing on here is that idea of more data requires more sophisticated analytics. So there's two key requirements for an observability solution, really any observability solution. First, the observability solution needs to be able to handle these large-scale data sets. As mentioned, monitoring and diagnosing requires working with some amount of data, but it's this troubleshooting phase where the observability system really needs to be able to handle almost unlimited amounts of data from logs, metrics, and traces. And this is a challenge for many observability solutions that don't have a high-end and highly scalable solution. Well, fortunately for you and us, built on a cloud-native architecture, Sumo Logic enables the ingestion and storage of any amount of data in a highly elastic and flexible way. Now, secondly, the observability solution needs to have a very scalable analytics engine. Observability is going to require the analyzing of lots of data and machine learning and other initiative search-driven analytic capabilities. As a large-scale machine data analytics platform, Sumo Logic provides out-of-the-box capabilities that support the ingestion analytics of any amount of data. So we got the right tool that can do what we need it to. Now, this slide, similar to the other one, kind of a little variation on it. And what I'm trying to show here is what is one aspect to achieve this end-to-end reliability is that unified observability platform. So what does that mean? Well, on the far left of the screen, we have things that are creating data. And we want to get all that data telemetry. So we need to get that data from our applications, our app components, Kubernetes, host, our CI/CD pipeline, AWS. All this data is being generated and it needs to be brought into Sumo Logic. Now, once we have all that relevant data, such as the metrics, the metadata, the logs, the traces in Sumo Logic, then we can go ahead and start to monitor, diagnose, and troubleshoot. And what we're going to look at today is probably a little more focusing on the troubleshooting portion, but the ability to do so. Yeah, one more, well, actually a few more slides here. Now, with the monitoring, diagnosing, troubleshooting, there are many teams and use cases that can benefit from Sumo Logic. So, for example, the DevOps and the SREs on your team, those individuals that are responsible for monitoring the health of an application, observability is going to be helpful for them. Why? Because it can help them monitor, diagnose, and troubleshoot application health issues. Observability is going to help the software engineer on the team or multiple software engineers on the team by providing visibility into the software pipeline. By collecting information about the software pipeline and identifying issues with the software delivery process, teams can improve the quality as well as the delivery of their application. Observability can also help the security team, those DevSecOps folks, ensure the security posture of their application. And what's sort of unique about Sumo Logic, or at least the Sumo Logic observability solution, is that it can address the needs of all these teams and personas in one integrated platform. Now, here's another slide showing a very similar idea. On the far left, we have monitoring, diagnosing, and troubleshooting. And then in the center, what I'm trying to kind of show here is what stage or what level of detail you need to look at things with. So at the very top of the monitoring, I have this green and red kind of gauge, I guess you could call it. And so it's pretty, as I described earlier, it's pretty easy to monitor something is red or green, good or bad. You can just set a number and the system will let you know, hey, it's above it or below it, and that can trigger a warning. And that's, like I said, very easy to set up. But that's not necessarily, well, it is helpful, of course, but more helpful would be to dig deeper. Is there a problem at the deployment or the cluster level? Getting down to the pod level, the component level, really getting into the nuts and bolts, if you will, and ultimately getting down to the root cause. And so the ability to start to dig deeper, going not just from monitoring, but diagnosing and troubleshooting. All right, the last slide that kind of drills home this monitor, diagnosing, troubleshooting is this slide right here. And what I'm trying to show here is those 3 steps. And then across each row is showing what features within Sumo Logic can assist with that. Now, there's more than just these 3 features in each row, but these are some good ones. So for example, with the monitoring, outlier is a helpful feature. Prediction is quite a helpful feature. With diagnosing, time compare and log reduce and other things. But we're going to be focusing on troubleshooting today. And what we're really going to be focusing on today, or one of the things we're going to be focusing on today, is the bottom right here, which under troubleshooting is that root cause explorer. And we're going to see that shortly of what Root Cause Explorer is. I'll talk about it in a lot more detail later. I have some more slides before we get into it, but that's what we're going to look at later. So many features within Sumo Logic can help with many, many issues. This last quote I find humorous. I don't know if you will, but what it says is, we replaced our monolith with microservices so that every outage could be more like a murder mystery. And what this quote's almost 10 years old now, wow, is describing is using observability. Essentially, you can start to see where things happen, when they happen, why things happened. And so it starts to be, if you remember, once again, showing my age here, the old board game Clue, or the movie Clue, the idea that we can figure out that it was Professor Plum with the knife in the observatory and really, drill down and find that out. And so that's kind of cool, and I think it's sort of humorous, but anyway. All right. So now let's talk about Sumo Logic with AWS. Yeah. Now, AWS encourages the use of separate AWS accounts to help manage costs and give teams independent control. Additionally, different accounts often have different settings across regions, depending on the needs of a specific app. Now, once you're in a specific account and region, there's a multitude of services that customers can use. As you see here, I mean, there's many of them. They keep growing, probably 50, 60 of them within AWS, even more. And what the problem here is that all this complex hierarchy can often leave vast data silos where it can be difficult to acquire a clear picture of overall AWS service health across regions and accounts. So if we look at this first slide here, just the numbers on, should be, there we go. So what we found is, and this data is kind of old, but it's probably even higher by now, is 44% of customers have 2+ accounts. 47% of customers have 2+ regions. So what we're finding is a customer might have an account for production data. They might have an account for development data. They might have an account for QA data, and many, many more. They might have an account based in US East. They might have an account based on US West. They might have an account for India, an account for South Africa, South America, all these different AWS regions. And so the concern is, you have a lot of different accounts across a lot of different regions. You might be utilizing a lot of different services. We found that our or the typical AWS customer is using 21 different services. And once again, that's probably higher by now because they have more services. And so that this causes complication. And so very simply, troubleshooting is complex. You have a lot of different regions, you have a lot of different services, you have a lot of different accounts. How do you troubleshoot those from one, or how do you troubleshoot them, period, excuse me? Well, fortunately, from the complexity and chaos of AWS account management comes the clarity and root cause of Sumo Logic. And so what we're able to do is take all those different data silos, those different accounts, those different regions, those different services, pump them into Sumo Logic and view them in Sumo Logic in pretty dashboards. Might be oversimplifying by saying pretty dashboards, but that's the value add here. So that's kind of the goal. All right. Let's see. So certainly if there's questions, go ahead and ask, but I'm going to keep going here. And actually, we're going to get into labs pretty sort of soon. All right, let's go through a couple more slides here. So the first feature that we're going to introduce is Root Cause Explorer. And this is Root Cause Explorer. It looks chaotic, but as we go through it, and we'll get hands-on in it shortly, I'm just going to use this screenshot just for now, we start to see stuff. So let's start to kind of go through this. It's like I said, it's very busy, but with filtering, we can start to clean it up. So what we have here is, and let me, just one moment, I'm trying to get That's okay. All right. So what we see here is an x-axis and a y-axis. The x-axis is representing time. And so in this case, we have a 3-day period. And the y-axis is representing drift in a percentage. And what we mean by drift is essentially deviation from the norm. 0 would be normal, higher would be abnormal. And so this is starting to show us abnormalities, if you will. Once again, not necessarily all bad. Well, yeah, it's usually bad things, but it doesn't have to be. And what we see at the colors here are representing different, as we call them, EOIs, or events of interest. Essentially, the system, Sumo Logic, has looked through the data or is monitoring the data and has found these things of interest. They're events of interest, EOIs. The name kind of implies what they are. They get categorized by color. So we can see errors that have occurred over the past 3 days, bottlenecks. We do see successes, easy for me to say. And then what we see on the far right is we'll have the ability to click on one of these EOIs or these events of interest and start to get some understanding about what the item is. So for example, what we see here is one of these items has been selected. And on the far right, we're looking at some metrics related to burst balance. What that is doesn't really matter, but we're starting to see that. We're starting to see different time periods here. So for example, we see the color, and this is on the far right under the word metrics. I was trying to get my highlighter or my pointer to show up, but I'm having a little trouble with it. And so with the far right, we see the green line, we see the light blue line, we see the dark blue line, and these are representing different time periods. So for example, in this top right burst balance average graph, we see the light blue line representing the metrics for right now. We see the green line representing the metrics for yesterday. We see the dark blue line representing the metrics for a week ago. And so we're starting to see here is that this metric is going a little lower. Well, it's lower than last week. It's higher than yesterday, and that might be good, that might be bad, but we're starting to get that understanding. So let me see, I might just go into Root Cause Explorer. Yeah, let me go ahead and let me just log in and let me show you from there. And then we'll all log in shortly. So let me just go ahead and log in real fast. Or actually, you know what? Let's all log in together. We'll do this as a group. So what I want us to do is, here we go. Just give me 1 second here. So we're going to use some training accounts for this exercise. And let me put these in the chat as we're starting. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to service.sumologic.com to log in, which hopefully you're familiar with. If you're not, that's where we go to log into Sumo. For today, we're going to use the email of training plus analyst number. And I want you to select a 3-digit number. Maybe you want to be training plus analyst 007. Maybe you want to be training plus analyst 123, training plus analyst 259, 614. Pick a 3-digit number. So it's going to be training plus analyst number at sumologic.com. And then the password is going to be security with a capital S, 22 exclamation point. So go ahead and log in. We don't want to use our normal Sumo accounts because we want to go into our training environment because we have training data that we can play with. So go ahead and log in. If you need help getting logged in, let me know. Of course, it's probably going to be a typo just to be fair, but certainly give a shout. Also, once you do get logged in, if you can put the number that you're using, if there's overlap in the numbers, it doesn't really matter for these exercises, but that way I can just confirm that you're logged in. So once again, service.sumologic.com, training plus analyst number, and you pick a 3-digit number. And then that password of security 22 exclamation point. You might find that somebody has logged into your account previously. If so, that's fine. It doesn't really matter. I'll show you how to kind of clean it up, although hopefully you feel like everybody here should know, but if not, that we'll go through it. All right, cool. I see you guys logging in. Good. I'll give everybody another moment or two. All right, I think we're good-ish. Yeah, all right, I think you guys are good. Ignore this. let me log in first and then kind of show you. So when you get logged in, you might have tabs open. If you do, go ahead and go to one of the tabs and you can click on it on those three dots. Hold on. Let me do that again. On the three dots and then close all tabs. And ideally, I'd like you to get to a screen that looks like this, which is the home page of Sumo Logic. Once again, hopefully you've seen this before, but if not, I guess I'll do a quick, very quick tour. This is the home page of Sumo Logic. If you get an account is locked out, let me know the number, and then just try another 3-digit number as well, Tessa. I'll try and fix that later, and yeah, just try a different 3-digit. So when you get logged in, like I said, this is the home page. The idea of this home page, like any other home page in the world, is to get you up and running as quickly as possible. And so as you start to open things, run things, do stuff, it will show up in here. On the far left is going to be a nav bar that may be hidden. This black bar, it may be hidden, it may not be. I just want you to know where it is for right now. We may open it up in a few moments, but for now, it doesn't really matter, but that's where it is. A couple of things just while we're in here with just Sumo basics. There is a Learn tab. So as a reminder, if you want to learn more about Sumo, this is probably a good place to start. We have videos, documentation, all kinds of stuff. And then our certifications. If you haven't been told to be certified yet, you might be at some point. And so you can go in here and actually get certified. Take an exam. It's free for you, free for the company, your employer, or a customer's employer. And so it's a great way to, prove your knowledge. But what I want to do is I want to start at the home page. And what I actually want to do first is I want to go to Explore. I'm going to kind of modify my my walkthrough here today. I'm going to kind of do this on my toes a little bit. What I want us to do is go to Explore. Now, as you may or may not know, there's usually 2 ways to do everything in Sumo Logic. I can go to the home page and I click on this Explore button, or I can go to the plus new and go to Explore. Same difference, and I want to do that. Now, when I do that, what I'm going to be brought to is an Explore by view. By default, you may not have any data, and that's okay. I'm going to explain why right now, so don't get too nervous, but hopefully you should really be on you should be on this page actually, or pretty close to it. What we're seeing now are different views that we can explore by. Now, in this case, by default, it sorts things in alphabetical. Actually, it's not alphabetical order. It's order that items were put in. So this is a Kubernetes service view. We're not really focusing on Kubernetes. If we were, we would be going through this, but that's not today's topic. What I want us to do is go to the Explore by on the far left and select AWS Observability. That should open up something virtually identical to what I'm looking at. Might take a moment to load, might not, but now what are we looking at? What we're starting to look at is our AWS data. Now, one of the things I mentioned just previously is the complexity or the complexity of looking at various accounts within AWS. You might have a production account, you might have a QA account, a staging environment, whatever. Right here, I am able to select from those. So for today, we want to look at production data. We could look at dev data. We have a mobile banking production account. That's not today's focus, but so we're going to go to production. So imagine we're in charge of an AWS account for a major person or customer rather. Well, we probably want to look at our production data. When I look at our production data, this is all the data that's being brought into Sumo Logic. And now I'm seeing all this AWS information in a nice view. I am now seeing on the far right where my incoming activity locations are coming from. Where are people connecting from? This can help just from a security standpoint. Should people be coming from China, North Korea? If I see somebody coming out of Russia, is this a security concern? Maybe, maybe not. And that, right away, this map can help me in that standpoint. As I start to scroll down in this map, I'm seeing other things about AWS data, but related to my production account. So I'm seeing things about the EC2s, the RDS, other services that I might be utilizing. Now, one of the other problems I mentioned earlier with the various AWS accounts is the region. What if I want to look at my production US East 1 data? I might want to look at my US East 2 data. I might have US West data. I might have that South Africa or South America data in here. And I can now start to look at these regions. And very simply, by just clicking here, I'm now viewing them. Now I'm going to use US East 1 as the example for today. But when I click on this region, now I start to see all these services, or as we refer to them as namespaces. So now if I want to look at my DynamoDB, I can see that. If I want to look at my Elastic Cache, my Lambdas, my EC2s, I can start to view those. And very simply just by clicking on them. So when I click on this one, hopefully I know what ELB is. But now I start to get information about stuff, all kinds of stuff, using the generic technological term of stuff. But we start to see errors, load balancer, overall health. Are these peaks good? Are they bad? And valuable information. Now, what I want us to do for right now, and I'm kind of crossing my fingers this works, but let's see. Perfect, or sort of perfect. What I want us to do is go to the production. So we should be under AWS Observability. We should be under prod. We should be under US East 1. And I want us to go to application ELB. Now, what this ELB, and it's actually an ALB, but they call it ELB, is essentially application load balancer. And what I see here is, once again, I get my map, but I start to see other information. I start to see error codes here, and I start to see where we have a lot of them and where we have a few of them, lower number. I can scroll down here. And what I want to point out for today and kind of for the exercise we're going to play with for a few moments is this. What we have here is our load balancer. And what we're detecting here are 500 errors. And these are essentially status codes. Best example of a status code, when you go to a website and you get a file not found or a page not found, what status code do you get? Yep, a 404. And so a 404 would fall under a 400 error. 400 errors, 401, a 402, a 403, a 404, those represent client errors, or those represent server errors. Fives represent, I think, client errors. And so they start to tell us different things. I don't want to get too much more technical than that because it's overkill for right now. But what we're starting to see here is, for most of the day, we see our 500 errors in either we're going to use the yellow line here, but we see it's pretty level. 10 errors, 9 errors, 8 errors, 9 errors, 10, 10, 10, 10. But what I see here at about, what time is this? This would be 5 o'clock yesterday evening, is I see a spike in those errors. So there's still errors, but there's a lot of them. Why are we getting almost 5x the amount of errors that we normally do? And then I see a drop off. And then, interestingly enough, about 5:30 or so the next day or the next morning, I see that spike in errors. Now, the reason we have these spike in errors is twofold. One, it's going to be utilized right now for part of the example that we're going to go through. The other thing we have is very simply the system is our training environment. And so we have it replicating data periodically, in this case, every 12 hours. So at 5:30 or 5:20 every day, both AM and PM, the system generates this spike. Now, what we're going to try and do next is figure out what's causing this spike, but we're not there yet. So where we're at right now is we're seeing the Explore tab. We're viewing essentially our AWS data in Sumo Logic using pretty graphs. Much more valuable than that description, but that's essentially what's going on. Now, we also have a lot of other dashboards that are available to us. And so we can start to use these. If we go back to prod, actually, let me just go back to where I was to do all that. So if we go back to application ELB, we can go to these other dashboards. Now, what I'm going to select here is one of these other dashboards, these the ones that have 2 events of interest. Shouldn't matter which one I pick. I picked the newer one, but it shouldn't matter. And what this is starting to show me is not Root Cause Explorer, but very similar to it. If you remember earlier, I showed Root Cause Explorer and it had done loading. Here it is. What this is showing us is essentially Root Cause Explorer for the specific criteria we're looking at. So in this case, we're just looking at production, we're just looking at US East 1, and we're just looking at the application ELB. So just this specific service. And remember, when we're using this service or viewing this service, like we just saw in that graph, we're seeing these spikes. Now the system is representing these spikes here as events of interest, and specifically as errors. If I click on one of these, on the far right, I should see a graph that's pretty similar to what I was trying to describe earlier, where we have our 500 error count. It's kind of low, low, low. And then at about 520 or 530, it spikes. And then drops down just because the error, because it just, once again, it's replication process. In the real world, it might continue at a high level. It might not, but. And we see that information about it. So we start to see it's the application load balancer. It's associated with this entity. We'll talk about entities later. It's related to this metric. Here's the drift. Here's that deviation or standard deviation from the norm. And the duration. So for 20 minutes, from 5:30 to 5:50, it was high. It was abnormal. It was weird. And so this is what this is showing us. Now, what I'm going to do next is I want to go into Root Cause Explorer, and I want you to join me. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to plus new, and we're going to go to root cause. It might take a moment to load. Actually, it should take a moment to load because it's now, once again, looking at all the data that has previously occurred and looking for these abnormalities, these spikes, things like that. Now, what I want to do next is I want to modify my time range. Remember, I want to show you an example of something that happened at 5:30 this morning, which is more than 3 hours ago. And this graph or chart by default shows 3 hours. So I want to go ahead and just select last 6 hours. It's going to take a few more moments to load. There it goes. Now, right now, I'm just going to let it finish loading. I think it's done. Yeah, it's done. We have the ability to utilize filters up here. And we want to use the filters right here. Because what this is showing us by default is it's looking at all of our data, all of our services, everything, production data, Kubernetes data, application service data, and it's showing it on the same graph. And we want to filter that because we don't care about the Kubernetes data. We have Kubernetes data in the system, but that's not for this demo. And so that to show it on this chart is just noise. So what I want to do is I want to kind of clean this up a little bit. I want to turn off the application services. I just don't need that information. That's not relevant for this use case. I want to turn off the Kubernetes. Same idea. I'm just not showing Kubernetes. We're doing AWS. And once I have that, the last thing I want to do is I want to go to region and I want to select US East 1. So once again, we're going to go to, I kind of did it in reverse, but if we go to AWS and host, we're going to leave that on. We're going to select US region 1, US East 1, US East 1 for the region. For Kubernetes, we're going to turn it off, and then application services, we're going to turn it off. And now what I want to do is start to have this thing help us. So what I'm going to start is on the far right. Here are the errors. Remember those 500 errors that we saw earlier in the Explore? Here they are. Very clearly, there's an error. It's in red, red bad, scary. There's an error. Now, what we see to the very left of it, though, are some bottlenecks. And what we're being told here, and we can start to click on these, is that these bottlenecks are occurring right before these errors. What we can then be led to believe is these were the cause of that. And so we're starting to see over a time period what happened after it, the association that the fact that these are all part of the same US East 1, they're part of the same data set. And so we're starting to get that connection. And so now we can start to see that prior to that, a DynamoDB table, which is one of our database tables, had a bottleneck issue. As we see here on the far right, we see our right throttle events were really spiked. And so what this is telling us is the fact that we had something creating a lot of events. I guess it's really that simple. the events were peaking or spiking. And so this is where the root cause explorer is starting to help us understand that. Now, what we could do, we're not going to do it right now, but I want to show it just because it's a nice feature, is the ability to start to look at the logs that are associated with these messages. So what we could do, we're not going to do it right now, but we could actually start to go deeper and see why we're getting these spikes of right throttle events. Did somebody do something wrong that is increasing the amount of right throttle events? And so this is where we can start to use this root cause explorer to dig in and see what's going on, what happened before it, was it a cause of something else? And so this can be quite helpful in that respect. All right, let's see. Wow, we are, let's see, time is an issue, but we can go over a few more things. And I do apologize if I'm a bit accelerated with my pace here. I apologize really. I'll give you access to all this content later. And certainly this, this is just a intro, not an intro, but just a workshop here. All right, now I want to switch things up a little bit. Let's see, Tom. Yeah, all right, let's see. Let's go through this. We'll do some of it. And so now what I want to do is switch gears and talk about tracing. So root cause explorer, cool feature, not relevant to what we're going to talk about now. What I want to use here, actually, I'll skip this. I'll go straight into this. What I want to use here is the idea of an example that's easy to understand. Sumo Logic Coffee. If you didn't know, we have a Sumo Logic Coffee sister company that sells coffee. We don't, but for this example, let's pretend we do. It's a real company. It's a production environment. We sell coffee through our app. Customers buy it. It's like a green label, very happy, all good. And when you order a cup of coffee from Sumo Logic, it's essentially like going through microservices because there's going to be various steps that need to take place. The customer is going to place the order of coffee. The order is going to go to somebody. That somebody, the barista, is going to work with the coffee machine. The machine is going to need to check that it has adequate levels of ingredients. And if it does, it's going to start to blend those beans together. The machine is going to check that it has water, the appropriate amount of level of water, and add that. Going to do its magic, and then the cup of coffee is ready. Now the customer then needs to pay for that order. It needs to go through a credit card service, and then the customer will be able to pick up that order. And so, like I said, an order for a cup of coffee in a traditional just brewing a cup of coffee has essentially microservices in it. Now, this is an example of those microservices. So what we see is, as mentioned, the customer places that order for the cup of coffee, and the barista turns on that coffee machine. The machine's going to take a moment to turn on. The payment service is going to be enacted because the system needs to figure out how much did that cup of coffee cost. If they're ordering multiples, add them up. Is there tax involved? Things like that. And then on the top side, we have the machine service, which is actually just brewing the cup of coffee. And so once again, all these services are taking place, and these can all be recorded. And what we're going to see shortly are these services within Sumo Logic as a transaction for each order. So getting there in a moment. So before we do, I want to show you service maps. And so what I want you to do, I want you to do this with me, is go to the plus new at the very top and go to service maps. Now, when you get to service maps, actually, if you or the person using this account has never been in here, you'll get this nice understanding of what they are, which you're welcome to view. I'm hopefully going to describe this to you right now. But what we see here are the various services that are taking place. Now, in this case, as with the other examples, we have more data than we need in here. So what I want us to do is really just focus on this one right here. But what we see are those services that I just described. We see the coffee bar. And so that's going to be our name for our general coffee service. Then we see the cash desk that's responsible for the calculations of the transaction of calculating how much that cup of coffee costs. We see the coffee machine, and we see these machine services. In order to brew a cup of coffee, you need water. And so we start to see these two services taking place. We see colors here, red and blue. Blue around the circle is okay, it's normal. Red is an anomaly. And when we put our mouse over the red circle, we see what the anomaly is. In this case, there's latency related to the coffee service. And so that latency is telling us that there's latency brewing the cup of coffee with the ingredients. There's also some issues with the cache desk and other stuff. And so this service map just gives us a very nice simplified view of what's going on. And we can start to figure out where things might be going wrong, or at least where anomalies are occurring, which are things going wrong. All right, so that's service map. Also, as we start to click on these things, feel free to click around, we start to see some graphical information, just a little bit more detail about, in this case, the latency, the request, the errors, things like that. All right, let's see, let's go. Good, yeah, good example, Zoe, as you enjoy that cup of coffee, absolutely. Let's see, I want to see, all right, because we have just a few more minutes. Let's look at let's look at traces. Yeah, this is a topic I could spend a lot of time on just alone, but let's look at them quickly. So what I want us to do is I want to go to plus new, and this time I want to go to traces. What we're seeing now with these traces are these transactions, these coffee orders. So what I see here is a trace ID, and a trace ID is essentially it's a transaction number. Each cup of coffee or each coffee order is going to have a unique trace ID. What I see as well here under the started at column is when did this start? So essentially, when did the order get placed? I can see were there any errors. I can see the status on the far right. So I'm starting to get that insight into my orders. If I click on one, I want to look for a good one here, one like this. What I see in here, and the trace view explanation right here is going to describe exactly what I'm about to describe. But what we see here, as it says, is we see the time flow of a single trace by its spans, essentially by its components of the order. So this order took this long. Here's the order number. And here, you can kind of zoom in here a little bit, we start to see those various services that are part of ordering the cup of coffee. So for example, we see the paying, the cash desk here that I referred to, that cash, the calculation of the charging of our credit card. I see down here, now the zooming does make it a little bit weird. But now down here, I see the coffee service. I see the water service. I can go a step deeper. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope this works. But what I should be able to do is click on either the water service or the coffee service, and then choose one of these log options. I'm going to choose the span ID. What the span ID is going to let me do is view the logs that make up this portion of the transaction, essentially the logs that are associated with the water portion of making a cup of coffee. Kind of specific, but that's what it's going to show us, or what should show us. So fingers crossed, I'm going to open log span. And perfect. What I see here is the order was received for 60 milliliters of water to brew the cup of coffee. The water in the amount of 60 milliliters was provided. So the system checked, did I have the right amount of water? I did. Let me add it. Cup of coffee is starting to be made. And so that's how we can start to get even deeper, where, you know, to use technology to view the details on making a cup of coffee is quite helpful. We can also, if I go back, let me go just back to the trace view. We can also start to see where things got hung up. So let me see if I can find an example. I'm kind of just doing this as a guess on the fly. Yeah, and this is okay. What the red lines represent are errors. So what the system is telling us at the lowest red line is there was an issue here. And so if we mouse on it, we see that there was an issue with the cache desk. Now, what we should be able to do with those logs is we should be able to see more specifically what the error was. So let's see. I'm kind of gambling here to see if this works. I'm going to click on the green with the red line. I'm going to click open logs on the first one, the span ID. It's going to take a moment. And well, what do I see here? It's kind of messy, but what I see here is essentially the payment in progress. The system's starting to calculate what I ordered, how much it costs. It's getting the pricing information. It's querying the price for the database. And then for whatever reason, it's, lack of a technical phrase, crapping out here. Now, we could go deeper and figure out why exactly this is happening, but that's not this class. But we do get some information about, there is obviously something related to the connections just not working right. And so this is how we can start to utilize the traces and more specifically the spans, which are really just pieces of traces to view what's going on. All right, let's see. I know this is a lot at the end here, so I do apologize for that. Let's see if I have really anything else I want to talk about. So the last thing I did, the last thing is a bit of a big topic, but I just want to bring it up at least. And it's around unified alerting. As I was talking about earlier, creating monitors, very simple, can be informative, but how to do it is important. And I just wanted to show here, if you're a newer Sumo, this is the way it's always been for you. If you're an older Sumo like myself, in duration being at the company, this is sort of new. But what we're showing here is the idea of a unified alerting environment or experience, I guess you could say. And so what you can do very simply in here is start to create queries for your logs, for your metrics, and start to trigger at certain intervals or certain criteria are met so that you get an alert, and you're starting to monitor the system. And then you get that alert, and then you go ahead and do something about it. So the next time you go ahead and set up a monitor for cups of coffee taking a long time to add the water, we can start to set up a monitor to let us know that that's occurring, and then go in and start to play around with that. I'm not going to go too much deeper than that explanation, but I guess I'll show it real fast just in the UI. And so on the far left, if you go to manage data and monitoring, here we see all the different monitors that have been set up. Once again, a test environment, so a lot of these are just kind of garbage. But what we start to see here are these that have been set up. And so we can start to create essentially queries that look for certain criteria. And if they find that criteria or don't find that criteria in a certain time range, then we can set up a trigger that can send us an email or send us a Slack message or do various things like that. Let's see, anything else I want to cover here? Service map, span, let's see, spans, no spans I'll skip right now. All right, I think that's going to kind of cover it. So like I said, I know this was a lot in one shot. Hopefully this is not the last time you learn about observability. This is kind of a jumping off point for you. But I hope this was sort of helpful as an introduction. A little bumpy there, but I think we got through it. So I think if we're okay, good, I got to thank you. So that's good. All right, there we go. We got some positive. Yeah, so I think we're going to conclude for now. And then hopefully you're able to join us in another hour. We're going to go over Cloud SIM, which is totally different and kind of cool. So thank you for joining. Okay, cool. I'll see you, Zoe, there. Hopefully you'll have a new fresh cup of coffee, and see many of you other guys there as well. So we'll get back together in about an hour and we'll go through some new content. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy your hour. Bye all.